God, if you will, that we need and we need to learn. And in this case, Nahum is actually a continuation of a prophecy made about 100 years prior from a guy by the name of Jonah. Yes, that's right, Jonah and the city of Nineveh in particular. Now remember, in Jonah's job was to go and to proclaim God's judgment against this great city of Nineveh. And Nineveh was, to be sure, at this time, an incredible city. I mean, remember, this is happening 600 plus years before Jesus is born. And Nineveh is in many ways one of the greatest cities at this time, if not the greatest. I mean, it had walls that were somewhere around 100 feet high, and they had 200 towers around it, and that went 100 feet above those 100-foot long, and it had a moat 100 feet wide and 60 feet deep. I mean, this was a city that was built to last, if you will. It was a city that would have been considered impregnable. People estimate that somewhere around 100,000 people lived or more lived within the walls of Nineveh. This was a great city. And during the time of Jonah, God proclaimed judgment, and the city of Nineveh repented to Jonah's chagrin. Well, sometime between Jonah and Nahum, Nineveh went back and reverted back to what it was. And so that judgment that God had held off on Nineveh, well, it comes home with Nahum. And Nahum comes and he proclaims that they have worn out the patience of God, and now Nineveh is being judged. And sure enough, it happens. Nineveh gets overthrown. Judah gets to celebrate because Nineveh had been the source of a lot of wickedness and a lot of difficulty against the people of Judah, of Jerusalem and Israel. And so then Nahum goes around talking about the sins of it, and now it's tit for tat in terms of what judgment is happening. And so what do we take away from this? That's really the question. And there's two things. One, we have the lesson of the Titanic. Remember the story of the Titanic when the builder said that God himself could not sink the Titanic, and we see how that went. I would imagine the people of Nineveh probably thought the same thing about their city and about their world, that nobody would defeat them. Nobody could destroy them. Nobody could, we see what happened. Nineveh is destroyed. Nineveh doesn't exist anymore. There is no Nineveh, okay? Just like there is no Babylon. These great cities that man built eventually will pass away. They will go. The military strength that is the Assyrians, it's not there anymore. The Lord of hosts, as Nahum calls him in chapter 2, has come. The might of God, and takes her away. Destruction by water, according to chapter 2, and by fire. Complete, total destruction. No matter what we build, no matter what we think is going to last, it won't. Which is a great second reminder that our job as followers of Christ is to remember that there is only one thing that lasts into eternity, and that's relationships. Whether those relationships end up in eternity with us in heaven, or in eternity in the lake of fire in hell, well, our job is to proclaim the word of God. Our job is to be God's messengers. Our job is to remember that these things will come to pass. It may be 100 years, it may be 1,000 years, it may be thousands of years. The timing doesn't matter. Remembering, however, that what we think lasts versus what God thinks lasts, or what God knows lasts, are two very, very different things. We need to be living, as I've said many times, in the eternal mindset, thinking about what it is that we want to have last and what it is that actually will last. Relationships, souls are forever. This should give us a sense of urgency. We don't need to worry about 100-foot walls and 60-foot deep moats. Instead, we need to remember and realize and worry about the eternal status of the people around us. Okay, there's our thought for the day. We'll talk more next time with yet another look at an Old Testament prophet.